Welcome to Naked Spirituality, a video blog series of sacred attention therapy in the Center for Human Awakening. My name is Rob Meager. For more information about sacred attention therapy, the Center for Human Awakening, and our video blog series, please visit our website at www.centerforhumanawakening.com. And center is spelled C-E-N-T-E-R. These video blogs support one of the Center's core activities, which is collaboration and partnership with individuals, communities, and healing centers practicing personal growth and spiritual development. And our guests today are Elsbeth Meuth and Freddy Zental. And we'll be speaking with Elsbeth and Freddy about their healing work through Tantra Nova. And I'd now like to invite Elsbeth and Freddy to come on screen. Hello to you both.
Hi, Robert.
It's nice to be with you.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking the time to join us here. I wanted to begin by saying, if someone goes to your website, I certainly get the feeling that Tantra Nova is a well-respected institute focused on helping people develop, nurture, and maintain healthy relationships. What would you like us to know about Tantra Nova?
So thank you for that lead-in. And I want to build on what you just opened up, what we are all about and where our gift is, so to speak, that we have discovered in the course of our life and lives. And it has very much to do with learning to create intimacy and love.
Mm-hmm.
There is like an epidemic, situation in terms of relationships in our culture, where more than 50% of divorces, of marriages end in divorce.
Mm-hmm.
And second marriages, it's much higher in the 70%. So there's an indicator of that we don't really know how to do a relationship because the old way is no longer applicable, with the onset of emancipation of women and all of that. So, and I'm not saying we should go back to the 1920s anyway, but what are the principles and practices to create lasting intimacy and love, not just to fall into it, which we are all familiar with, but when we fall, I don't really know what I did. So that is like the distinct difference here that we bring to the world is the principles and practices of creating, emphasis on creating intimacy and love.
I'd like to pick up on something you started to speak about, and that was the approach, or what I might say the Tantra Nova approach, because you speak about it on your website. What is this approach, and what may be considered unique about the approach?
Well, there are so many approaches to seeing something or transformation, shifting something in our life that seems like we can't shift it, subjected to whatever it might be, relationship or lack of money or, inspiring place to live. So really seeing that we're creating what we're getting, there are a lot of processes to that. What makes us unique is that we work with the meditative practices and sexual energy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting because sexual energy was creating life before we were aware of our own existence. And there's a systemic intelligence, I call it, of creativity and pleasure that show up in our lives when we bring consciousness to the sexual. So forever we've been, procreating, creating life, and for the last 100 or so years recreating with the development of contraceptives. And what we're teaching is how to co-create with this intelligent energy. So when we're in our sexual energy, whether you're doing our work or not, we're more open, loving, vulnerable, receptive. Chemically we're changed, oxytocin is released, endorphins, serotonin. Now with the distinctions that we bring, a consciousness of breath, parasympathetic breathing, an awareness of our observer or witness state of mind, and an awareness of energy levels, sexual energy particularly, we're able to get more deeply connected to that aspect of ourselves, the unconscious aspect of ourselves that is giving us what perhaps we don't want unconsciously. So we're able to become more conscious about how we're creating our life.
Now, I'm going to ask a naive question. So I'm going to play a bit of the plant here in our dialogue. But I'm making an assumption that Tantra Nova is rooted in the Tantric yoga tradition. Would I be making a correct assumption?
Totally. So Tantra, coming from East India, and the Tao of sex, which comes from China, are two of the ancient traditions our work and we draw on. And then, of course, there are other traditions that, modern Western technologies of, how we use language in terms of creating our life in a generative way versus just in a descriptive or reactive way, and how that applies to creating love. Also, emotionality, a whole dimension on that. However, as Freddy said, there is something unique about the Tantric and the Taoist practices that call us into becoming aware of our sexual self versus being at the effect of it. Not that this is a bad thing, it is just takes us only so far. As Freddy said, procreation, recreation, all great, making babies, pleasure in the bedroom. And all of that will embellish through that, bringing awareness and what we call consciousness to our sexual self. So in terms of our physical sexual self, emotional self, and spiritual self, also, mental, intellectual self, we see this as a triad. And most of us are trained in our mental self through meditation that has become more fashionable in the West, also the spiritual self, also through therapy, the emotional self. However, the piece that has been missing is the sexual self. So when we tap into that, it's like a domino effect that the whole channel gets reintegrated, so to speak. And we do this in a conscious way because we have done it for millennia in an unconscious way. Because it's just nature. It's built into us. We are wired for it, which is wonderful. So, did that speak to your question?
It was beautiful, and it leads me to invite a little bit of an exploration of what I have found to be common misinterpretations or misunderstandings of the Tantric tradition, especially as it may relate to sexual energy. I was first oriented to Tantric practices, both yoga as a whole, as well as sexual energy practices back in the 90s. And over the years, my understanding of the tradition at its core, at its root, has changed fairly dramatically. And what I wanted to ask you both is, what misunderstandings or misinterpretations do you commonly find, maybe even with the people who come to work with you, or just with the Tantric yoga tradition as a whole?
Well, let me say, Robert, that there are many variations of Tantra, or Tantra. And what we've done is, again, as Elsbeth said, we've integrated aspects of Western technology and how we find transformation, and some of the Eastern approaches to transformation. But what is unique is this working, again, consciously with sexual energy. Now, we've eliminated all the dogma. So in terms of our lineages, my lineage comes from actually a lot of what I learned from my father as a psychiatrist, and him working in the human development awareness aspect of his work over the years, and watching him work. Osho, I used to love reading Osho, Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh. I loved him for many years and still have many of his books. But the approach of working consciously with sexual energy doesn't belong to anyone. yet it's been so vilified in our society. And it's the love energy, it's the creative energy. And you know, it doesn't seem sexual when creativity shows up in our life, yet the same things are happening chemically: oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, and usually things are working. So if we can bring more creativity about how we're creating what our imagination sees as what we would like to have in our life as a possibility, then we can be more fulfilled as human beings. And that's where this becomes a spiritual practice, working consciously with sexual energy.
If I may just build on this a little bit. Yeah?
Please do.
Yes. So that also, you may have noticed that we don't use the word tantric sex. Because in our work, it's really that integration of that triad that I just mentioned a little earlier, of the sexual, emotional, and spiritual. Because once we reintegrate, when we are like the sexual, spiritual are just like a yin and yang, like this, you know, they complement each other. It's not that one is better than the other. Oh, so, and, you know, we are not just about sex. And of course, the sexual is one of the three keys here. As an opening, as an awakening, as a becoming more conscious, and out of that, being empowered to live a happy, fulfilled, you know, and joyous life. That is what this is about, both individually, as couples, in relationship, and for humanity, you know, like that is our ultimate dream and vision. It's just done one individual or one couple at a time.
Let me add too, specifically in terms of what people oftentimes come expecting, which is better sex in the bedroom and you know, all of that, and that will certainly happen. Yet what happens for most of the people who come do this work is their whole life shifts. Areas that seem completely unrelated to sex start to shift. You know, like, you know, you might come in with, you know, well, I hate my job. What am I going to do 30 more years of retirement? After we start becoming conscious of how we're creating our life, either I start being grateful and seeing the things I love about my work, as an example, or I shift it because the listening becomes different. Not so lost in the left brain, you know, rationalize suffering, if you will.
So, you know, Robert, when we speak about the heart, we speak about emotions, like it's all about opening our heart, which includes, you know, being willing to feel vulnerability. To, you know, initially it may feel like being exposed to oneself or to another. In order to mature as a human being on the emotional level, it's that we embrace, as you know, the whole range of emotions, our anger, our hate, as well as also opening to love and you know, the tender feelings. And so when we translate this into our sexual self, is that we want to learn to open to our magnificent sexual self that actually, when we look at sexual energy, and Freddy already alluded to it, has two key ingredients. One is creativity, creating new life. It's wired into us. And pleasure. It comes with pleasure. You know, the creators, the goddess and goddesses, whoever, you know, has really designed that beautifully so that we, because of the pleasure, come back to it over and over again. So we procreate, so we, you know, continue to exist. It's quite magical. And so, as Freddy said, the hormones that actually get activated and released in the sexual experience, both in solo and partner practice, they get released when we are excited about life. You know, so we use that interconnection and actually turbocharge our physical chemical being, our opening the heart, and connecting with our consciousness. Now you can imagine there is a whole practice that is dedicated to learning that, which is not about having sex, will affect and influence how we have sex. That it can be done by oneself or in partnership, and it really embellishes self-experience and how we can infuse our visions, our projects, our intentions with wonderful, creative, pleasurable energy. Now that's magical.
Elsbeth, I want to circle back to something you shared almost at the very beginning of our time together today. And you talked about intimacy and love. And Tantra Nova working with people to improve, increase, blend these together. What I wanted to ask you both, is intimacy and love different? Are they the same?
Yeah.
They lead the same place. You know, intimacy oftentimes brings about this sense of oneness, fulfillment, connectedness, stillness, and we can learn to love that feeling. You know, there's an overwhelming, joyous feeling in just being still. And then the will comes in, and the endorphins come in, and the hormones come in, and if we're with another, then all of that attraction stuff starts.
So let me just also further, introduce these distinctions of love, intimacy, and sex. Yeah, there are more distinctions, but for this conversation, let's do this, like romance and, infatuation. I mean, there's a whole variety.
Drama.
That we have confused. And so I'm really grateful that you bring up this question. So intimacy can be seen, let's distinguish intimacy. There's sexual intimacy, there's emotional intimacy, there's spiritual intimacy, And as a maturing human being, we want to be able to play these different registers just like we play an organ. Yeah? Which means that if I want to become conscious of my sexual, because anyway, so love itself doesn't need to be with a sexual or sex. Yeah, love is, particularly unconditional love, is something that we mature into as human beings if we are willing to go there. It has to do with an opening of the heart and compassion for self and compassion for others, which is, a great challenge for us all, stepping out of judgment of self or of others into compassion. So that is associated with love that doesn't expect anything back. Now, emotional intimacy usually is connected, or spiritual intimacy is connected with love. That because emotionally we are open. But then with intimacy again, it can show up in, like when we teach people, our foundations work is all about emotional intimacy. How can I open up in a sexual, sensual way to Freddy Zental in a true way if I'm not connected emotionally, intimately with myself? Then I can connect. It's not possible, or it becomes just like acrobatics, which is fine. There's nothing wrong about it, but that is not what we are about. And given that we want to assist people in creating intimacy and love, so we want to distinguish there. And then, of course, sexual intimacy, in the way we teach it and bring it about, is then always connected with emotional intimacy. It's like the next step. Although sex can show up without emotional intimacy, without love, without spiritual intimacy, all of these can stand in a solo way, and they can consciously be created, integrated together.
What capacity and opportunities for healing is there in the work that you do at Tantra Nova?
Well, healing at all kinds of levels. A lot of what appears to be suffering is what we make up. It's a lousy day if the rain falls because I say so, but it doesn't look like I really have a choice. So really getting that we have choice can end a lot of suffering and a lot of discomfort that we experience in our life. I always say things don't stop happening, they just don't stick around as long. We move more quickly through the downs and are able to come back to that just savasana, belly breath and breathing and being present, and moving towards what it is we want to create, how we want to feel.
Yeah, and then healing also in terms of our sexual self, because our sexual self and sexual energy has been vilified for millennia. It's an arena that is either sensationalized, like in advertising, in movies, violence and sex, or it's suppressed or oppressed. So and for women it's even worse, because feminine sexual energy got vilified even more, unlike masculine sexual energy, the playboy,
harem.
Yes, and it's a little different. And then also the using of the one who is dominant, of the one who is subordinate in the sexual dynamic, has been around for millennia to this day. And there is wounding that has happened. And so while I didn't come to Tantra because I had like a sexual wounding as a child or so, I also didn't come to Tantra to have better orgasms. I already had good orgasms, but I came to Tantra because I struggled with having lasting intimacy and love in my life. I had this pattern of attracting unavailable men, and it was like 20 years ago, not that long ago, relatively speaking. And what I discovered through the healing practices that are just really superb, these practices, and very powerful, what I got in touch with was that I had held distrust towards men. And that had to do with an experience when I was 18 years old, first boyfriend, very much in love, first intercourse was very painful, had to go to the gynecologist. The bill from the gynecologist went to my house, my dad opened it, all hell broke loose, and I felt so alone and misunderstood. And that was the moment when I made the decision that men are never really there for me when I need them. And it was trailing me in the background, not in my conscious self, but in the background to the time when I experienced the healing ritual for the woman. And I had worked on it in therapy, but it lived on the cellular level as a memory that was not accessible to my conscious, So I just, as an example, it is extremely powerful because we go to places that cannot be remembered by our mind, but are being remembered by our body.
And again, the sexual energetic in the healing ritual, we're so open and loving and vulnerable in this, intimacy and this sexual connection, aligned with wanting to see something, as Elsbeth was explaining in her experience and her healing, is where a lot of the healing can happen for people.
And profound, Robert, there are both women and men coming to us, some of them who had sexual abuse or wounding in their past, and they have done, extensive therapy often, which we actually appreciate, because they already have done work and, they already have a kind of a handle on it, but there is still that sense of victimization underlying. Not that they want that, but it's like, again, lives on the cellular level. And there we have just beautiful openings. It's like the ultimate healing that can happen, freeing, so that they can create happy lives and choose the kind of relationship or the solo life, really embracing that, whatever it is that is right for them. But from a place of freedom, from letting, keeping the past, leaving the past in the past, and now being present to experience their pleasure, their joy, their love, all of it.
As a question to bring our time together to a close today, overall, what could a person or a couple expect when they would come to work with you and Tantra Nova?
Well,
What will they experience?
well, you know, we have so many testimonials from all walks of professions and educational levels and genders. What is reported, what my experience of this is that they will have a profound sense of intimacy, into me I see, and a relief from a lot of the story making that happens around the suffering in their life and in their relationship. So that's what they can expect. We always do an intake where people fill out what they want to get out of this work. And that can be, you know, more love, more orgasms, work that's fulfilled, whatever, anything. And in that, they start to see shifts in their life. So that's what they can expect, is shifts around a lot of the things that they want to create and change in their life.
Yeah, really what people get out of it is learning how to bring love and intimacy into themselves and into their lives on all three levels, sexual, emotional, and spiritual. And they can learn in different ways with us, because some people love to work in groups. Other people don't want to work in a group. They prefer the private, the one-on-one attention, either as an individual or as a couple. All of our foundations courses, where there is a co-ed one, which is called Secrets to Lasting Intimacy, or Freddy teaches an all-men's workshop, Men's Sex and Power, or I teach an all-women's workshop, Awaken to Your Feminine Essence. These three workshops all are foundational and have to do with connecting with the self, with, as Freddy said, into me I see, opening up to intimacy within. And then our advanced work is where we teach the sexual intimacy practices that can be healing, that can also be awakening, that can be deepening in relationship. And then we have a 3-month mastery program if people want to do it, really advanced work that leads then also to certification. So it's a whole variety and progression of work that people can do with us.
And so if someone wanted to reach out to you, if someone wanted to get in touch with you, how could they do so? Through your website, email, social media?
Yeah,
Yeah, our website, absolutely. TantraNova.com, TantraNov, like Victor, A.com, TantraNova.com.
like supernova, Tantra Nova.
Very good. We'll make sure that's scrolling in the credits at the end. They can reach out to you through the website. There's an email address there if they wish to reach out to you by email.
TantraNova at TantraNova.com.
Okay. All right.
We also have a phone number, 773-525-5006.
Very good. And there's a plethora of opportunities to follow you on social media if someone goes to your website.
Yeah, and also just Tantra Nova on Facebook, we show up.
Very good. Okay.
Yeah.
Elsbeth, Freddy, I want to thank you so much for your time. It was a joy to be with you. The one thing I take from being with you is your authenticity. And it's something I rejoice in being in that space with people, just to be in truth with someone and to be able to connect on that level with someone. So I thank you both.
Thank you so much, Robert.
You.
Yeah. Great that you're doing this work, and appreciate being on your program.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.